The great chamber of the Galactic Council was built to impress. Its ceiling stretched higher than any cathedral ever made by human hands, covered in silver and light that shimmered like water. Around the wide circular hall sat the representatives of more than 200 worlds, beings of every shape and size. Some floated, others crawled. Many sat in strange metallic pods that translated sound into vibration or light. And in the center of it all stood a single group of humans. They looked small among the giants. Their table was simple, their clothes plain. But their faces carried a kind of quiet strength, the kind that comes from surviving storms, wars, and mistakes. At the center of the group stood their speaker, a calm, middle-aged woman with tired eyes. Her voice, when she finally spoke, didn't shake. "Members of the Council," she said, her tone firm but polite. "Earth has honored every term of the peace accord since the day we joined this council. We've sent aid to your worlds, shared our medicines, opened our borders for trade, and given soldiers when the galaxy called for defense. But the new restrictions you've placed on us, they are not peace terms. They are punishment." A low murmur spread through the chamber. Some delegates turned their heads, others whispered to their translators. The humans' words sounded bold, maybe even too bold. On the far side of the chamber, one of the larger alien representatives, a tall, blue-skinned figure with eyes like crystal, leaned forward. "Ambassador," the alien said, voice echoing through the hall. "Earth's problem is not punishment. It is pride. You refuse to share your military research, yet you ask for full trade access. You speak of equality, yet your fleets grow stronger every year. The Council cannot allow one young species to hold such power without oversight." The human woman didn't look away. "Oversight," she repeated softly. "You mean control." A wave of murmurs again. The word control carried weight, dangerous weight. But she continued. "Humanity has never asked for control over anyone," she said. "We only ask for respect. We joined the Council in good faith. But if the Council demands that we hand over our defenses, our data, our very safety, that is not partnership. That is surrender." Her voice echoed off the tall walls. For a moment there was silence. Even the translators paused. Then from the upper rose a laugh, sharp, cold, and echoing. It came from a reptilian diplomat representing a powerful trade coalition. "Humans always talk of pride and honor," he hissed. "But your kind still fights among yourselves. You destroy your own planet's forests and call yourselves advanced. The Council offers you structure, yet you treat it as an insult." The human delegation stayed quiet. They had heard words like these before. Humanity had fought its own battles, not just wars, but reputation. To the Council, humans were ambitious, emotional, unpredictable. They had risen from a small blue world only a few decades ago and already had fleets that rivaled ancient empires. Some called them the fastest growing power in history. Others called them a threat. The Council's supreme chair, a being of light that shimmered between forms, finally spoke. "Ambassador, this Council has voted. Earth must submit its weapons research for collective inspection. Until that is done, your planet will face trade restrictions and military patrols around its borders. These are the final terms." The woman took a deep breath. Around her, the other human delegates exchanged quiet looks, exhaustion, disbelief, and finally, resolve. She placed her hands on the table and stood. "I understand," she said slowly. "Then Earth refuses these terms." Her words hit the chamber like thunder. Dozens of voices broke out, some shouting, some laughing, some trying to call for order. The chair's form flickered, the light pulsing with agitation. "You refuse?" it asked, almost disbelieving. "Yes," she said. "We came here to build peace, not to surrender who we are." The alien representatives erupted into noise, overlapping translations, mechanical screeches, bursts of static. The humans stood silently among the chaos. Cameras floated in the air, recording everything for public broadcast across the galaxy. Billions would see this moment within hours. As the noise continued, the ambassador leaned toward her team and whispered, We're done here. They gathered, their tablets and notes, straightened their uniforms, and walked toward the large golden doors at the end of the hall. The guards moved aside, unsure if they should stop them. The sound of their footsteps echoed across the marble floor, a steady rhythm in the middle of shouting and confusion. Halfway to the doors, the chair's voice boomed again. Earth's retreat will be seen as an act of defiance, it warned. Are you certain this is your final decision? The human woman didn't turn back. No, she said. It's yours. And with that, the doors opened, and the humans walked out. For a moment, the great hall fell silent. Even the loudest voices froze. The delegates turned to one another, confused, surprised, or secretly amused. Never in the long history of the Galactic Council had a member world walked out of a peace meeting. Many thought humanity would come back within days, begging to reopen talks. Others mocked them as arrogant newcomers who couldn't handle galactic politics. But outside the hall, as the human delegation boarded their transport shuttle, no one was laughing. Inside the shuttle, the team sat in silence. The planet Virelia, prime sparkled below, the heart of the Galactic Union with its shining towers and floating gardens. From orbit it looked peaceful, even beautiful. But to the humans watching from the window, it now felt like a place of betrayal. One of the younger delegates finally spoke. Do you think they'll reconsider? He asked. The ambassador shook her head. Not yet. They think they've won. They think cutting us off will make us bend. So what do we do now? She looked out the window, her reflection faint against the planet's glow. We go home, she said, and we prepare for what comes next. The shuttle engines hummed to life, pulling away from the Council's spaceport. The city lights below grew smaller and smaller until they became a cluster of glowing lines. The crew sat quietly as the stars filled the view outside. In the communication bay, messages from Earth awaited. Reports of the Council's vote had already reached the planet. Some governments were angry, others were afraid. But one thing was clear: Earth would not accept the Council's demands. The ambassador read the message from Earth's leadership. It was short, only a few lines. Return home. The Council has chosen pride over peace. We'll handle the rest. She closed the message and sat back. The meaning was clear. Diplomacy was over, at least for now. Whatever came next would no longer be words across a table, but actions across the stars. Hours later, their ship entered faster than light travel, leaving the Council's capital behind. In the quiet of space, the humans finally allowed themselves to speak freely. One of them said, "They don't understand us. They never did." Another replied, "They think peace means control." The ambassador looked around at her team. "They'll realize their mistake," she said softly, "but by then, it might be too late." No one answered. The stars stretched into bright lines as the ship jumped into the void. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued its meetings, confident that humanity's silence meant surrender. But silence, as history often proves, can mean many things. Back on Earth, the skies were clear. The cities glowed with the warm light of evening. People went about their lives, working, building, planning. But deep beneath the oceans, in hidden bases and orbital stations far from the public eye, something was already beginning. Engineers and scientists worked around the clock, reviving old projects that had been frozen under treaty restrictions. Fleets that had been in maintenance quietly rearmed. Old research files were reopened with new urgency. Humanity wasn't preparing for war. They were preparing never to be cornered again. News channels across the galaxy broadcasted dramatic headlines. Human delegation walks out of peace summit. Some commentators called it foolish. Others admired their bravery. A few warned that the Council had underestimated them. But overall, the galaxy saw Earth's retreat as weakness, another small world too proud to play by galactic rules. And yet, among the few who had studied human history, there was quiet unease. They remembered how quickly humans adapted, how fiercely they defended their freedom when pushed too far. Every major conflict in human history had started with the same thing: someone else telling them what they couldn't do. In the coming weeks, the trade restrictions began. Council patrols appeared near Earth's borders. Supply routes slowed. Communication channels were monitored, but humans said nothing. No protests, no negotiations, just silence. To the Council, it looked like obedience. To humanity, it was patience. The ambassador sat in her office late one night, looking out at the dark sky beyond her window. The stars shone brightly, as if watching from afar. She thought of the council chamber, the arrogance in their voices, the laughter when she stood her ground. For the first time since leaving Earth, she smiled faintly. "They'll learn," she whispered to herself. "The galaxy always does." Outside, a storm gathered over the city, lightning flashing across the sea. It would be remembered as the night humanity began its quiet retreat, not from peace, but from those who mistook their courtesy for weakness. When the humans left the council chamber, the galaxy didn't go silent. It laughed. Every major news channel across hundreds of worlds ran the same story. Earth walks out. Talk shows mocked the decision. Commentators called it arrogance, inexperience, or even madness. Some alien leaders said humans were too emotional to be part of the civilized order of the stars. For a few days, that was all anyone could talk about. The council released an official statement the next morning. It sounded polite, but the message was clear. "We regret that the humans have chosen to withdraw. The council will continue to maintain peace and stability in the region, with or without their cooperation." To most of the galaxy, it sounded like the end of the story. To the humans, it was the beginning of something else. Back on Earth, the mood was different. The capital's streets were filled with quiet unease. People watched the broadcasts, seeing their representatives walking out of that shining alien hall. Some were proud. Some were angry. But all of them felt something deeper, a question that no one could yet answer. What happens now? In a small press room in orbit around Earth, the ambassador who led the peace team stood in front of dozens of cameras. The reporters shouted questions all at once. Will Earth reconsider the Council's demands? Has humanity declared independence? Are we going to war? She raised a hand to calm them. No, she said softly. We are not going to war. We are simply choosing dignity over submission. Peace cannot exist if one side is forced to kneel. Her tone wasn't angry. It was calm, even sad. The broadcast was replayed millions of times that night. Across colonies, mining stations, and research outposts, people paused to listen. For the first time in years, Earth spoke not as a junior member of the Council, but as something older, steadier, a voice that carried both experience and warning. A week later, the Council's sanctions began. Cargo ships carrying medicine and supplies were stopped at border checkpoints. Energy trade was frozen. Messages between human colonies were slowed or blocked by technical delays. At first, it seemed manageable. Earth had survived isolation before. But this was different. This time, the whole galaxy was watching. In one colony near the edge of Council territory, workers found their shipments delayed indefinitely. The station ran low on parts and power. Still, no one panicked. They rationed supplies and kept working. It's not the first time the universe tried to starve us, one worker joked. We've had worse. On the news, Council representatives said the sanctions were temporary measures, but the human government knew better. This was pressure, meant to make them return to the table, humbled and quiet. The ambassador met with Earth's leaders in a private meeting. Around the large circular table, holograms flickered. Generals, scientists, diplomats, and engineers. The air was thick with silence. We can't fight the Council, one of them said. They have hundreds of fleets. They can surround us within a week. We're not fighting them, the ambassador replied. We're reminding them who we are. Her words hung in the air. No one fully understood what she meant, not yet. Months passed. The galaxy moved on to other news, trade disputes, border skirmishes, new discoveries. But every so often, a small story appeared on a distant broadcast. A pirate fleet near the outer sectors suddenly vanished. A Council patrol disappeared during a routine check. Unidentified ships seen moving through deep space. At first, no one connected these things. The galaxy was large, full of mysteries. But the reports kept coming. And the strange part was, each event happened near human territory. Still, the council ignored it. Coincidences, they said. Random incidents. But behind the scenes, they were worried. They sent scouts and drones to investigate. None came back. Meanwhile, humanity grew quieter. Trade reduced, but industry increased. The shipyards on the moon glowed day and night. New energy readings came from the asteroid bases once thought abandoned. A massive orbital ring project resumed construction under full secrecy. Ordinary people didn't know all the details, but they could feel something shifting. The news stopped covering the council entirely. The word retreat had been replaced by rebuild. When asked in interviews what Earth was doing, the ambassador's answer was always the same: preparing for peace, the right kind of peace. On the council's side, confusion turned into irritation. Months without communication made the alien diplomats restless. One of them slammed a clawed hand on the table during a meeting. "Where are the humans? Have they forgotten their place?" Another replied, "They're licking their wounds. Let them stay quiet." But deep down, unease crept in. Humanity's silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like waiting. Finally, the council sent a diplomatic envoy to Earth, a fleet of 10 ships carrying mediators and peacekeepers. The fleet never arrived. Their last transmission came from halfway between systems, a short static message. "Entering human sector now. Readings unstable." Wait, and then nothing. The council claimed it was an accident, maybe a spatial anomaly. But rumors spread fast. Some said human defense grids had been reactivated. Others whispered that Earth had built something powerful in the dark, something the council had never seen before. Inside human command centers, work continued quietly. Scientists and engineers tested new systems: silent drive engines, stealth armor, communication arrays that could hide signals from council sensors. These weren't weapons of conquest. They were shields, tools built to protect, not to dominate. "Let them think we're afraid," one officer said as they watched a holographic map of their borders. "The more they underestimate us, the safer we are." The ambassador visited the main shipyard once. The workers stopped as she entered, not because of her title but out of respect. They knew what her decision months ago had cost: trade, comfort, reputation. Yet she didn't look regretful. She only said, "Keep building. The galaxy is watching, even if they don't understand why." Far away on Virelia Prime, the council's shining capital, meetings turned tense. Reports of missing ships kept piling up. Patrols refused to enter human space. One younger diplomat stood up in frustration. "We may have made a mistake," he said quietly. The others turned to him. He continued, "Humans don't act out of fear. They act out of purpose. If they're this silent, it's because they're doing something we can't see." The room fell silent. The older council members dismissed him with cold smiles. "You give them too much credit," one said. "They're a young race, impulsive. They'll come crawling back once they realize isolation means starvation." But the younger diplomat wasn't so sure. On Earth, life went on. The skies were peaceful, the cities busy, but beneath that normal surface, everything had changed. Factories that once built civilian ships now produced advanced engines. AI systems once used for trade were rerouted to defense networks. Even students in universities were being trained for interstellar coordination and emergency logistics. Every level of society was quietly preparing, not for war, but for independence. The ambassador gave a private address to her team one evening, transmitted across all human colonies. She stood in a quiet room with a single light shining above her. Her expression was calm but resolute. "When we left that council chamber," she said, "they thought we were walking away in weakness. But we walked away in dignity. They will not respect us until we stand as equals. And to stand as equals, we must show them that humanity does not beg for peace. We build it." Her speech spread across human networks, not through loud propaganda, but through whispers, shared messages, and quiet belief. For the first time in years, humanity felt united. The galaxy still mocked them in news feeds, calling them Silent Earth, the stubborn world, the lost member. But slowly, the laughter faded. Other races began to notice something strange. The humans who once traded freely now operated completely alone. Yet they didn't collapse. In fact, their colonies grew more efficient. Their technology advanced faster than before. A merchant captain from a neutral world once reported seeing human ships patrolling near the outer edges, sleek, silent, and glowing faintly blue. "They didn't hail me," he said. "They just watched, like guardians." As the months turned to a year, the balance of the galaxy began to shift. The Council had kept its power for centuries by controlling trade and diplomacy. But humans were teaching the galaxy something new, that strength didn't always come from power or numbers. Sometimes it came from the quiet will of a species that refused to be controlled. The ambassador stood again in her office one night, staring at the stars beyond her window. Messages from her team scrolled across her screen. Updates on progress, new systems tested, colonies secured. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the day she walked out of the council hall. The sound of the golden doors closing behind her still echoed in her mind. That day she thought they were losing everything. Now she realized they were gaining something much greater: freedom. The lights of the city below flickered as the night deepened. She whispered softly to herself, "They'll learn soon enough. We never walk away without a reason." And far beyond the horizon, in the deep silence of space, a human fleet moved unseen, not to attack, but to stand watch. Waiting, patient, calm. Because sometimes the most powerful message isn't spoken in words, and it's spoken in silence. Months had passed since humanity's retreat from the council chambers, and the galaxy had begun to grow used to the silence. What once filled the headlines, debates, rumors, and predictions, had now faded into background noise. But that silence carried weight. It was not the silence of defeat. It was the kind of silence that made people uneasy, like the pause before a storm that no one could see but everyone could feel. The council had expected humanity to return by now. They expected apologies, petitions, and long speeches asking for another chance. But none came. No requests, no communications, no visits. Earth had simply gone quiet. At first, the council felt confident. They believed humanity had learned its lesson. They thought the sanctions had worked. But soon reports began to arrive that didn't make sense. A patrol ship vanished near the outer edge of human territory. Then another, and another. The missing ships weren't destroyed, though they were just gone. No distress calls, no debris. Nothing but silence. Some council members called it coincidence. Others blamed pirates. But the pattern was strange. Pirates avoided human space ever since Earth's old defense systems had scared them off years ago. The disappearances were happening too close, too clean, too quiet. In one council meeting, a representative from the trade sector raised a trembling voice. "These are not random incidents," it said. "Something is happening near the Terran border." But most ignored it. The chair simply replied, "Humans are impulsive. If they are acting out, it is out of pride." Nothing more, yet deep down even the chair was uneasy. The galaxy was too quiet. Meanwhile, on Earth, the silence was anything but empty. It was full of motion, planning, and quiet determination. Across continents, massive factories that once built passenger ships were now retooled for something else. Engineers worked around the clock, building new systems designed not for attack but for defense. Orbiting stations glowed softly in the night sky, and large supply convoys moved in and out of Earth's shadow, carrying cargo to secret destinations. People on the ground continued with their lives, but everyone could sense that something was changing. Even ordinary citizens spoke about it in hushed tones, not out of fear, but pride. At a small cafe overlooking the ocean, two workers watched a distant transport rocket rise into the sky. One of them said quietly, "They think we're backing down. Let them keep thinking that." The other nodded, smiling faintly. "We're just getting ready." Far above, in orbit, the ambassador stood on a viewing deck inside a massive station. From there, Earth looked peaceful, blue oceans, white clouds, and the glow of cities shining through the dark side. It was easy to forget that beyond that beauty, the rest of the galaxy saw them as rebels. An officer approached. "All communications remain quiet," he reported. No new messages from the council. The ambassador turned her gaze toward the stars. "Good," she said. "Let them stay curious." The officer hesitated before asking, "Do you think they're starting to realize?" She smiled faintly. "Not yet, but soon." Her voice was calm, but there was a depth in it. The voice of someone who knew the weight of history was shifting again. Back in the council's capital, meetings had grown tense. Reports showed strange energy readings coming from regions close to human borders, signals no one could identify. Some said they resembled experimental engines. Others dismissed them as sensor errors. The chair called for a private discussion. "We will not let one small world challenge the order of the galaxy," it said coldly. "Send additional patrols, double the surveillance," and so they did. Hundreds of small ships were deployed to watch the edge of human space. But the more they watched, the less they found. Their scanners picked up shadows, faint traces of movement but no ships, no bases. It was as if something vast and unseen moved just beyond their reach. One scout captain's final log entry was later recovered from a drifting pod. It contained only one sentence: "They see us before we even know they're there." After that, the Council stopped sending small patrols. Back on Earth, the silence of space was their ally. Every plan, every project, every move was hidden behind layers of confusion and noise. The humans had learned quickly. The galaxy's strength came from its size and openness. But that same openness made it predictable. Human engineers worked in isolated teams, each knowing only a small part of the whole design. Communication was tight, encrypted, and short. Even the most advanced Council sensors couldn't detect the quiet hum of human technology developing under the radar. A new kind of fleet was being prepared, not large, not for conquest, but smart. Ships designed to move silently through the dark, unseen until they wished to be. Ships that could outthink, not outgun. To the rest of the galaxy, humanity looked like it had gone to sleep. In truth, it was waking up, but even as progress continued, not everyone agreed. Some leaders questioned the growing secrecy. "If we keep hiding," one of them said in a meeting, "the galaxy will fear us even more." The ambassador replied, "Let them fear misunderstanding, not aggression. We are not preparing to attack. We are preparing to survive." There was quiet after that. No one argued. They all understood. For humanity, this wasn't about pride anymore. It was about self-respect, about never being forced to bow again. Weeks later, a trading vessel from a neutral world passed near the human border. The captain recorded something strange. A shadow moved across the stars. Too smooth, too silent, too deliberate to be natural. It followed them for several minutes before disappearing. When they returned, the captain told the story to a Council reporter. "It wasn't a ghost," he said. "It was a ship. I don't know what kind, but it was human. And it watched us like it was making sure we were safe." The story spread quickly. Some dismissed it as space illusion. Others whispered about a secret human fleet, invisible, patient, watching from the dark. Inside Council chambers, the mood shifted from arrogance to concern. Reports from border worlds said piracy had dropped dramatically, completely vanished, in fact. No one attacked trade routes near human space anymore. It was too quiet. One representative spoke up. "If the humans are behind this, why would they protect our borders?" The chair didn't answer immediately. Then it said, "Perhaps to send a message that they don't need our permission to keep peace." The room went still. For the first time in generations, the mighty Galactic Council felt something it hadn't felt in centuries: uncertainty. Back on Earth, the ambassador stood again on the viewing deck. A faint hum filled the air as a transport ship left the dock, heading for one of the new colonies. She watched it disappear into the stars. A quiet voice behind her said, "The Council's losing patience." Their last message demanded an explanation. She didn't turn around. "And what did we send?" "Nothing. Just silence as you ordered." "Good," she said. "Let silence do the talking for now." Her eyes followed the ship until it vanished completely. "When they're ready to listen," she added softly, "we'll speak again. Not before." Far away in the deep reaches of human territory, massive stations powered up quietly. Their signals were faint and hidden, blending into the background noise of the universe. Inside those stations, crews trained day and night. They weren't preparing for battle. They were preparing for responsibility. Humanity had seen too many wars. They knew what destruction looked like. Their goal now wasn't domination. It was deterrence, and to make sure no one would ever threaten them again. And so the months rolled on. The galaxy continued its routines, but things felt different now. The laughter had stopped. The jokes about impulsive Earth were replaced by quiet questions. What are they doing? Why have they gone silent? What if they're building something? No one knew the answers. On one distant world, an old historian spoke to his students. He pointed to a holographic image of Earth, floating gently in the center of the classroom. "Never underestimate a species that learns faster than it is feared," he said. "When they are quiet, they are thinking. And when they start thinking, the galaxy should listen." Back on Earth, night had fallen. The ambassador sat alone in her office, lights dim, the stars bright outside her window. She remembered that day in the council chamber, the arrogance, the laughter, the walkout. At the time, it felt like the end of something important. Now she understood it was the beginning of something far greater. Silence was not weakness. It was wisdom. She spoke softly into her recorder, leaving a private note for the future. "They believe we've retreated, but we've only stepped back to see the whole picture. Peace isn't built by surrendering. It's built by knowing when to stop talking and start acting." Outside, the sky shimmered with the light of passing ships. Humanity had disappeared from the council stage, but in the dark corners of the galaxy, their presence was growing stronger than ever. Calm, quiet, patient. Because when humans go silent, it's never the end. It's the warning before the world learns what they were capable of all along. After months of silence, the Galactic Council began to feel something strange in the air. What was once confidence had now turned into quiet unease. At first, they believed Earth had finally accepted its punishment. No communication, no presence, no resistance. The humans had vanished from the galactic stage, and to the Council, that was a victory. But deep down, some of them started to wonder, why was it so quiet? The humans were known for being loud, emotional, and restless. They always questioned things. They always pushed forward, no matter the odds. But now there was nothing. No diplomats, no trade ships, no updates from their colonies. Even the few human allies in neutral systems had gone silent. At first, the Council celebrated their success. The chair of the Council, a tall and wise being from the planet Thalor, gave speeches about how discipline and control were the keys to peace. The members applauded. They believed they had proven that power and order would always win, but as weeks turned into months, reports started coming in from the outer regions. Strange, unexplained events that didn't fit into any known pattern. A patrol ship from the Zealer system had disappeared without a signal. A small mining colony reported bright flashes in the distance before going completely offline. Traders whispered about seeing dark ships moving silently through deep space, ships that didn't match any known design. The Council brushed off these reports at first. Space was big. Accidents happened. Pirates roamed the far reaches, and sometimes communication systems failed. But the reports kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. A merchant convoy returning from the neutral zone said they'd passed through what looked like a battlefield, but there were no bodies, no debris, only silence. Energy readings showed something massive had happened there, but nobody knew what. A week later, another message arrived, short and incomplete. A voice full of static trying to send a distress signal. Unidentified ships, dark hulls, no lights, human design, approaching fast. And then it cut out. That's when the Council finally took notice. They held an emergency meeting, their great chamber glowing with a cold blue light. Representatives from dozens of worlds attended, their faces showing a mix of fear and confusion. The chair tried to remain calm as the security chief displayed a hologram in the center of the room. Grainy footage from a damaged probe. It showed a vast shape moving through space. Its surface was dark, almost black, with faint blue lines pulsing across it. It looked like a human warship, but larger, sleeker, and far more advanced than anything humanity had ever built before. The Council members began to murmur among themselves. How is this possible? One asked. Earth doesn't have this kind of technology, another said. Are we sure these are human ships? A third whispered. The security chief nodded. Every design trace, every heat signature, every movement pattern matches human engineering. But these ships are different. They're faster, stealthier, and the energy output is beyond our understanding. The chamber fell silent. For the first time, the Council began to realize that perhaps humanity hadn't disappeared out of defeat, but had chosen to disappear for another reason. The chair leaned forward, his voice calm but uneasy. Are we saying the humans have been building in secret? The chief hesitated before answering. We don't know, sir. But the signs point that way. Over the next few weeks, more reports came in. Remote sensors picked up traces of new shipyards hidden deep in asteroid belts. Entire moons had been hollowed out, leaving energy signatures that didn't match any mining activity. And then came the evidence that shook everyone: a transmission intercepted from a pirate band in the outer systems. The pirates were screaming. Their fleet had been ambushed. They described human voices coming over open channels, not with threats or warnings, but with calm precision, almost mechanical. Within minutes, their ships were disabled. None survived to tell the full story, but the fragments left behind painted a chilling picture. The council began to panic quietly. Some members suggested contacting Earth again, perhaps offering to reopen talks. Others argued that doing so would make them look weak. The chair tried to hold things together, but even he could feel the weight of fear pressing on the room. Behind closed doors, the council's intelligence branch worked day and night to gather data. What they found only deepened the mystery. Earth's military networks were now completely closed off. No transmissions could enter or leave. Even attempts to hack into their old channels failed. It was as if humanity had built an invisible wall around their world. And then something happened that changed everything. A science vessel studying a nebula near the Terran border detected strange movement. Hundreds of faint energy signals forming in precise formation. When they tried to get closer, all their systems went offline. For 30 seconds, they floated in darkness. When power returned, every trace of those signals had vanished. The ship's captain, shaken but alive, made one final report before returning home. "They're watching us. Whoever they are, they know we're looking." When that message reached the council, a heavy silence filled the room. No one spoke for several minutes. It was becoming clear that humanity had not been idle. They had been preparing. The realization began to spread slowly, among politicians, traders, and even ordinary citizens across the galaxy. News channels began to whisper about the Terran Shadow Fleet. Conspiracy theories filled the networks. Some said Earth had discovered ancient alien technology. Others believed they had simply focused their entire energy on defense and innovation after the humiliation at the peace talks. Whatever the truth was, one thing became certain: humanity had withdrawn not out of fear, but to become something stronger. Months passed and the council grew restless. Some members tried to send peace probes toward Earth again, but none returned. A few brave journalists attempted to travel there themselves, hoping to find answers. They never came back. It was as if the entire solar system had become a fortress. The chair finally called a private session, attended only by the most trusted members. He spoke with quiet honesty. "We thought they needed us. We thought we could control them. But now I fear we may have created something far beyond our control." A silence followed. No one argued. Everyone felt it. That uncomfortable truth they had all ignored for too long. And then came the final spark. A distress signal arrived from the Valora system, a council-controlled mining world at the far edge of the frontier. The recording lasted only 2 minutes. It showed unknown ships descending from orbit, black, sleek, and silent. They moved like shadows across the stars, disabling every weapon and communication array in seconds. But there was no attack. No destruction. The ships simply hovered, scanning the planet, and then vanished into the void. The message ended with one line from a frightened controller: "They didn't come to fight. They came to watch." That single sentence spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Everyone had the same thought: the humans were back. But they weren't acting like the aggressive species the council once mocked. They weren't sending demands or showing anger. They were silent, calm, and calculating. The council realized too late that this silence was not a sign of weakness. It was the kind of silence that came before a storm, before something powerful enough to change the balance of everything they knew. As the council members sat in their grand chamber, each of them could feel the weight of what they had done. They had pushed a proud, determined species too far, and now that same species had returned, watching from the darkness, not for revenge, but for something else entirely. No one said it out loud, but everyone thought it. The humans have learned, and they've changed. The galaxy had spent decades calling them reckless, emotional, and unpredictable, but in their silence, humanity had become something new, something the council could no longer understand or control. And somewhere, far from the Council's reach, deep in the dark between stars, a human fleet moved quietly, waiting for the right time to step back into the light. It started quietly, like everything else about humanity after their retreat. No one expected them to come back. The Galactic Council had almost convinced itself that humans were gone for good, buried under the weight of their pride, too embarrassed to face the galaxy again. The Council continued its meetings, making speeches about unity and progress, but deep down, a nervousness remained that no one dared to say out loud. Every time they saw a faint signal on a long-range scan, someone would whisper, "Could it be them?" And each time they told themselves it wasn't. Until one morning everything changed. The sky over Virelia Prime, the jewel of the Galactic Council, darkened. It wasn't nightfall. It wasn't weather. It was something else. Something massive. The first to notice were the skyport workers, who stared in confusion at their scanners. Hundreds of readings appeared all at once, filling every frequency. Ships, many of them, silent, unannounced and moving with purpose. The ground trembled softly as shadows spread across the city. The great towers of the Council's capital were suddenly under the shade of something enormous. When the clouds cleared, everyone saw it. Floating above the planet was a fleet unlike anything they had ever seen. Dark metal glistened in the sunlight, the edges glowing faintly blue. Each ship moved in perfect harmony, forming shapes and patterns that seemed almost ceremonial. There were no signs of weapons firing, no alarms blaring, just silence, deep and heavy silence that made the whole planet hold its breath. And in the middle of that silent armada was one ship larger than the rest. Sleek, sharp, with markings that every being in the galaxy recognized immediately. The crest of Earth. The Council's great chamber filled within minutes. Representatives rushed in, voices overlapping, faces pale. The chair stood at the center, struggling to keep order. "We must establish contact," he ordered. "Now!" Technicians worked frantically to open communication channels. The screens flickered, showing static, then black, then finally, an image. A calm, steady human face appeared on the screen. No anger, no fear, no expression that revealed what they were thinking. "Just calm, authority. This is the Terran fleet," the voice said slowly, clearly. "We are not here for war. We are here to talk." The entire room fell silent. The chair leaned forward. "You appear without notice, you surround our world, and yet you speak of peace. What is it that you want?" For a moment there was no answer. Then the human spoke again. "Earth came for peace once. We came with open hands and you turned us away. You called it surrender. You taught us what your peace truly meant." The Council members shifted uncomfortably. They all remembered the day humanity walked out. Some of them had laughed. Some had called it a show of weakness. Now, looking at that massive fleet hanging above their world, none of them were laughing. The human continued. "We asked for equality. You gave us conditions. We asked for partnership. You gave us punishment. We asked for dialogue. You gave us silence." Then the screen flickered, showing the image of the sky above Virelia. Hundreds of human ships forming a ring of light around the planet. "We didn't return to fight," the voice said. "We returned to remind you that peace cannot exist through pride." The chair tried to respond, but his voice trembled slightly. "What are you asking for?" The human's expression softened, almost saddened. "Nothing. Only that you remember what you've forgotten. Respect." The transmission ended. Outside, people filled the streets, staring up at the sky. Citizens, traders, workers, beings from 100 species, watched the silent ships above them. Some felt fear. Others felt awe. Many just felt the weight of something historic happening right before their eyes. The Council scrambled to decide what to do. Some members whispered about calling for help, though everyone knew no one could match the fleet above them. Others suggested opening formal talks immediately, but before they could decide, a new signal arrived. It wasn't from the fleet. It came from within the Council's own archives. A message stored years ago, back when humanity had first joined the interstellar community. It was the recording of a human ambassador's first speech. Her voice played through the chamber, clear and sincere. "We come not to rule, but to stand beside you. We are not perfect, but we believe in learning, and if the galaxy teaches us, we will listen." The room went silent. Every member remembered how they had dismissed those words back then. They had seen humans as emotional, unpredictable, too passionate to be trusted with power. And yet now those same humans stood above their world, stronger, wiser, but still speaking of peace. Finally, the chair stood and looked around. "We have made a mistake," he said quietly, "and now they have come to give us a chance to fix it." He opened the main transmission channel himself. "This is the Galactic Council," he said, his voice steady. "We request a meeting, no terms. No conditions, just a meeting." For several moments there was no reply. The entire planet seemed to freeze, waiting. Then the human voice returned. "Agreed. Prepare your chamber." Within hours, the great hall of the council was ready. For the first time in years, the flags of Earth were raised again at the entrance. The hall was filled with silence, the kind of silence that comes before something important. When the human delegation arrived, everyone stood. They walked with quiet confidence, not arrogance. Their uniforms were plain, without symbols of rank. But the weight they carried was clear. They represented not just a nation, but a species that had rebuilt itself from rejection. The chair stepped forward and spoke first. "When you left this chamber years ago, we believed you were giving up." The human leader looked around the room, their eyes calm. "We never gave up," they replied softly. "We learned, we built, we changed." There was no anger in their voice, only a quiet truth. The chair nodded slowly. "Then perhaps it is we who must change now." The two sides stood across from each other, once divided by pride, now connected by something deeper, understanding. As the talks began, the tone was different from the past. There were no raised voices, no demands, no threats. Every word was careful, deliberate, respectful. The council listened this time, truly listened. They realized that humans didn't come back to punish anyone. They came to show that peace could only exist when all sides treated each other as equals. Outside, the people of Viralia watched from the streets and rooftops as the human fleet slowly adjusted its orbit. The ships glowing softly in the night sky. To many it looked like a ring of light, a silent promise that the past could be rewritten. As the hours passed, something remarkable happened. For the first time in generations, the council chamber echoed with the sound of genuine agreement. Documents were exchanged. Declarations were made. Words of trust replaced words of control. And when the final terms were read aloud, both sides rose to their feet. The chair extended his hand. The human leader took it. A moment of complete stillness followed. Then quiet applause spread through the hall. The humans had returned, but not as conquerors. They had come as a reminder that real strength wasn't in domination, but in patience, growth, and dignity. When the meeting ended, the human delegation stepped outside onto the balcony overlooking the city. The night sky shimmered with the glow of their fleet. The leader looked up, taking a slow breath, as if remembering every struggle that had brought them there. One of the council aides quietly asked, "Will your ships stay?" The human smiled faintly. "For now, peace needs witnesses." And with that, they turned away, their steps steady and calm. High above, the great Terran ships slowly began to move, drifting back toward the stars. They left behind no damage, no threats, no demands, only a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations. That peace is not given through fear. It is earned through understanding. For days afterward, the people of Viralia spoke of the moment the humans returned. Some said they felt humbled. Others said they felt inspired. But everyone agreed on one thing. The galaxy would never see Earth the same way again. The humans had once been dismissed as impulsive and emotional. Now they were seen as the species that had shown what true strength looked like: calm, unshakable, and rooted in the simple belief that respect must be mutual. As the last Terran ship disappeared into the horizon, the council chamber lights dimmed. The chair stood by the window, watching the faint streaks of light fade into space. He whispered softly, "Perhaps we needed them more than they ever needed us." And somewhere far beyond Virelia's orbit, the human fleet sailed silently home, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed, and a peace finally built not on fear but on understanding. The galaxy had gone quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the silence of arrogance or fear. It was the kind that comes after something powerful, a moment that changes how everyone sees the world. After the human fleet left Virelia Prime, the skies felt emptier, but hearts felt heavier. People looked up at the stars differently now. The same humans who had once been mocked for their stubbornness, their emotion, and their impatience had returned as something greater, calm, wise, and unshakable. Across the galaxy, the news spread like light through darkness. Every planet, every colony, every outpost repeated the same story. The humans came back, and they didn't come with threats. They came with peace. Even the Council's biggest critics had to admit the truth. They had misjudged humanity. They had seen them as reckless newcomers trying to play among the stars, not realizing they were dealing with a species that learned faster than anyone else. Now the galaxy was beginning to understand something profound. Humanity's strength was never in their weapons or their technology. It was in their ability to adapt, to endure, and to forgive. On Virelia Prime, the great chamber of the Council looked different after that day. The once cold and distant hall had changed. Conversations were warmer, quieter, more thoughtful. For the first time, the Council members spoke to one another not as superiors and subordinates, but as equals. The chair, who had once been known for his strict control, had softened. He no longer spoke of power and order. Instead, he spoke of understanding, listening, and cooperation. The human lesson had settled deep within him. Weeks later, he sat by the wide glass window of his office, watching the sun rise over the silver towers of the capital. The light reflected softly off the buildings, painting the sky in gold and white. He thought about how different the galaxy felt now. Before, everything had been about control. Who had more influence? Who had stronger fleets? Who made the final decisions? But after the humans returned, all of that pride seemed meaningless. The Council had seen what true power looked like, and it wasn't domination. It was dignity. Far across the galaxy, on distant worlds, people began to speak of humanity in a new way. Traders told stories about the Terran fleet, how it appeared silently, how it left without harm, how it demanded nothing but respect. Children grew up hearing tales of Earth not as a planet of warriors, but as a world of quiet strength. On some worlds, monuments were built in honor of the return of the Terrans. They weren't statues of soldiers or ships. They were symbols of peace, shaped like open hands reaching toward one another. In time, a new alliance began to take form, not a council of rulers, but a union of equals. And for the first time, the humans were invited not as members to be watched, but as partners to be trusted. When the invitation reached Earth, it was met with careful thought. Humanity had changed a lot since leaving the Council. They had become more independent, more united as one species. Old rivalries on Earth had faded because the galaxy had given them a new perspective. They had learned to stand together. Now, when the new invitation arrived, there was a long discussion. Some believed the galaxy couldn't be trusted again. Others said it was time to forgive. But in the end, the decision was made. Humanity would accept the invitation not to bow, but to build something better. When the new Terran delegation arrived at Virelia again, the moment felt completely different. There were no protests, no whispers of mockery, no walls of guards. Instead, the streets were filled with people waving, clapping, welcoming. The human representative walked through the grand hall, calm and steady. The chair met them at the center of the chamber, his voice filled with sincerity. "You once left this place in silence," he said softly. "Now you return in peace. For that we thank you." The human nodded gently. "We never wanted war," they said. "We just wanted to be heard." The chair smiled faintly. "And now we are all listening." That single sentence carried through every communication network across the galaxy. It became the line that defined a new age. We are all listening. Meetings continued for days. Plans were made to rebuild trust, to create fair laws, to open trade routes again. But this time there were no ultimatums. Every planet, no matter how small, had a voice, and slowly, something beautiful began to happen. Cooperation replaced competition. On one world, human engineers helped rebuild old alien cities that had been damaged during conflicts. On another, alien scientists worked with humans to develop cleaner energy that could power both worlds. Artists, teachers, and explorers traveled freely between systems, carrying ideas instead of orders. For the first time in generations, the galaxy began to feel like a home shared by many, not ruled by a few. Yet even as peace spread, the memory of what had happened stayed alive. People never forgot that humanity's silence had not been weakness. It had been the deep breath before transformation. One day, the chair visited a memorial built near the council's main plaza. It was simple. A circular garden with a small inscription that read, "Peace is built by equals." He stood there for a long time, remembering the arrogance that had once filled the chamber. He thought about the look in the human leader's eyes during that first return. Not anger, not pride, just quiet resolve. He understood now that strength wasn't about who could speak the loudest, but who could stand their ground without losing compassion. Back on Earth, life went on quietly. The skies were peaceful, the cities thriving. People still remembered the years of silence, but they didn't see it as isolation anymore. They saw it as the time when humanity rediscovered itself. The human fleets were still strong, but they were no longer feared. They were respected. And in the far reaches of space, when traders passed by human ships, they didn't see threats, they saw protectors, silent guardians ensuring the mistakes of the past would not repeat. Sometimes, young cadets aboard the newer Terran vessels would ask their commanders, "Why did we walk away back then? Why didn't we fight?" The older ones would smile softly and reply, "Because sometimes walking away is the hardest fight of all." That idea became humanity's greatest lesson to the stars. Years later, when the chair retired, his final speech to the Union still echoed the same truth. The humans taught us that peace is not a gift one side can give. It's something we all must earn, through patience, through humility, and through understanding. After his speech, the audience stood in silence for a full minute. Not out of obligation, but out of respect. That night, as the stars shone over the capital, small lights appeared in the sky, Terran ships leaving the system, heading home. The sight made everyone feel safe. Not because the ships were powerful, but because they represented something deeper, balance. And somewhere, far beyond the Council's worlds, in the quiet expanse of deep space, humanity continued its journey. They explored new frontiers, built new friendships, and always remembered the time when they had to remind the galaxy who they were. No one in the galaxy would ever underestimate Earth again. Not because of fear, but because of what Earth had proven, that the most powerful thing in existence is a species that learns from its pain and chooses to grow instead of hate. The story of humanity's retreat and return became legend. It was told not as a tale of war or conquest, but as a story of reflection, how one species turned humiliation into wisdom and isolation into strength. Children across different worlds learned it in their schools. Elders repeated it as a reminder that pride can destroy peace faster than any weapon. And every time someone spoke those words, "Peace is built by equals," they remembered the humans, the ones who had once walked away from the table not because they were weak, but because they refused to accept anything less than respect. In the end, the galaxy didn't just gain peace, it gained understanding. And it all began with one simple act: humanity choosing silence, and then returning with grace. Somewhere in the quiet void among the countless stars, Earth glowed softly, a blue world that had once been doubted, now shining as a symbol of what true strength really means.